Professor Indrani Mukherjee from the Department of English, University of Allahabad. The topic of today's module is post-colonial texts. I would like to discuss two texts, God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy and A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. Edward Said's seminal work Orientalism discusses how the East is viewed in terms of the West, often becoming the other. Frantz Fanon in Wretched of the Earth and Black Skin, White Masks shows how the identity of the colonized is suppressed and the internalization of inferiority and servility gradually creeps in. Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak in her essay Can the Subaltern Speak throws light on the silence and voiceless subaltern third world women who face oppression. Post-colonial theorists and feminists are complementary as they concern themselves with the struggle against oppression and injustice. According to Simone de Beauvoir, women are made and treated as the inferior other, while Helen Sixus in her essays, Sorties, points out that in a binary, a woman is always given a negative attribute. Both feminists and post-colonial theorists concern themselves with the struggle against oppression and injustice. They reject the established hierarchical, patriarchal system dominated by the hegemonic white male and deny the supposed supremacy of masculine power and authority. Being undeniably male-centered and Eurocentric, oppression of women is seen conjunct with that of class, race, ethnicity and nationality, thereby reducing all foreign women to vulnerable alien subalterns or exotic orientals in exploitative social constructs. Power dynamics reduce both women and natives to stereotypes who are denied any identity by the system. It controls everything, the family and the social institutions, the choices and even the destiny of the subalterns. Those victimized automatically internalize inferiority complex and denied the basic freedom of choice, they are alienated and suffocated within the stronghold of a system which they cannot break. Women and the weak low caste are among the most discriminated and marginalized. Subjugation is used by the powerful to exercise control over the weak and to maintain hegemonic patriarchal domination. The weak and the marginalized in most settled societies of the world have experienced low status, exploitation, oppression and loss of self-determination due to the inferior status assigned to them. Subjugation can be social, political, economic and psychological. Transgression occurs when the voiceless subaltern, which could include women and the low caste, the other, break the forbidden laws of love, marriage and social relations or bend the norms of caste class boundaries, family and religious conventions to exercise free will. When this resistance is deemed dangerous enough to jeopardize the conventional established order, it is curbed brutally. Rebellion is the inevitable fallout of domination. A type of cultural criticism, post-colonial criticism usually involves the analysis of literary texts produced in countries and cultures that have come under the control of European colonial powers. Alternatively, it can refer to the analysis of texts written about colonized places by writers hailing from the colonizing culture. In the essay Post-Colonial Criticism, Homi Bhabha has shown how certain cultures have misrepresented other cultures, thereby extending their political and social domination in the modern world order. The term post-colonial is usually used broadly to refer to the study of works written at any point after colonization first occurred in a given country. Among feminist critics, the post-colonial perspective has inspired an attempt to recover whole cultures of women so far ignored or marginalized. Women who speak not only from colonized places but also from the colonizing places to which many of them fled. Post-colonial criticism has been influenced by Marxist thought, by the work of Michel Foucault, and by deconstruction, which has challenged not only hierarchical binary oppositions such as West, East and North, South, but also the notions of superiority associated with the first term of each opposition. Arundhati Roy's novel exposes the constant struggle of women against their incessant exploitation and torture at the hands of a male-dominated society. The novel articulates the voices of all those who are relegated to the margins of society. As the narrator moves back and forth in time, the reader is able to see the course of events from several perspectives and vantage points, which are also reflected in the novel's epigraph. Never again will a single story be told as though it's the only one. The structures of power and oppression are often referred to and discussed by Roy in The God of Small Things. The novel is an exploration of subaltern agency and responsibility, as it focuses on men and women and children who struggle for their right to possess a voice of their own. It deals with all post-colonial experiences to conquer, to subjugate and dominate, which reflect the cultural impact of imperialism. If Ammu is the most oppressed and dominated character in the novel, so are her children Esther and Rahel. They are the mute witnesses to the patriarchal word's laws, the voiceless subaltern victims of the system and its ways. It is seen that Esther and Rahel's despair culminates with an incestuous stand between them, and their suffering results into something that is not acceptable to the society. Velutha, the untouchable, is the scapegoat and the victim of the entire oppressive system. Charged of kidnapping Sophie and raping Ammu, he is mercilessly beaten by the police. Mamachi used to get beaten regularly by her husband, but never raised her voice against this. Another oppressive figure is Mr. Holick, Ammu's husband's boss, a Western exploiter who uses women to satisfy his needs. All oppressed characters like Ammu and her twins are discriminated against. Mamachi openly demonstrates her double standards in condemning her daughter harshly for her relationship with Velutha, while vindicating her son for his illicit relationships. Ammu was denied college education as Papachi considered it to be an unnecessary expense for a girl, while her brother was sent to Oxford. It seems as if all the years of beatings from her husband has shaped in her a dark, hidden, monstrous feeling of self-loathe, which Mamachi never allows to erupt with all its might over her misbehaving daughter. The problem of marginalization is endemic to the entire plot of the novel. To use post-colonial terms, the other has been made out of Velutha, Ammu and the children. The question of identity also permeates the god of small things, since the whole Aip family has the problem of classification. Skin color and race are also seen to create a very different sort of power structure. There is no denying the fact that Velutha is marginalized and subordinate. Being a paravan and an untouchable, the society he lives in still regards this kind as inferior and unclean. Roy gives us a somewhat euphemistic picture of his status when the narrator shows us how Velutha appears in Ammu's dream. He left no footprints in sand, no ripples in water, no image in mirrors. Ammu's marginalization is also obvious. She is a divorced woman with 2 children to take care of. Ammu, Esther and Rahel were the worst transgressors. They all broke the rules. They all crossed into forbidden territory. Velutha crosses the most forbidden line of all, that of having a relationship with a touchable upper caste woman. The narrative also traces a range of options and choices, whether complicit, resistant, or both, to the dominant order. This is also close to the idea of agency in cultural theory. The question of identity permeates the god of small things, since the whole Aip family has this problem of classification symbolized in the novel by Mamachi's banana jam. Ammu dreamed of escaping from Aimenem and the clutches of her ill-tempered father and bitter, long-suffering mother. It was her love for Velutha that cost him his life and the children a chance of growing up normally. Indeed, she is not to be blamed for what happens, but in an attempt to live her life as per her own free will, she disregards the norms of the society and becomes the worst of the transgressors. Roy's novel is also seen as a critique, in consonance with Spivak, against the representation of a homogeneous example of third world womanhood. The narrative traces a range of options and choices, whether complicit, resistant, or both, to the dominant order. This is also close to the idea of agency in cultural theory. Arundhati Roy does not offer any stereotypes. She allows her characters to remain subjects as far as possible and responsible towards their deeds and actions. She does not deny her characters their agency and their choice to either comply with or resist. Now we come to the next text, 1,000 Splendid Suns by Khalid Hosseini. Hosseini's 1,000 Splendid Suns depicts the plight of women behind the walls of Afghanistan during several invasions in the country. The issue of feminism and gender equity has been raised throughout the characters of Maryam and Layla. Afghanistan brings all the ethical dilemmas of feminism and gender equity together. The issue of Afghan women's rights and freedom became a major concern just after the September 2001 attacks and the subsequent US military campaign in Afghanistan, which successfully overthrew the Taliban regime. These constraints and impediments had an immensely devastating impact on their lives. As regards gender inequality, oppression of women in Afghanistan is linked to a world of male dominance, most significantly associated with the Islamic fundamentalist group, the Taliban, in the early 1990s. It was during this period that the last signposts of Marxism were torn down and the rights of women were completely abolished. For Maryam and Laila, the day the Taliban rolled their tanks through Kabul was not their first encounter with repression, but it was the final event that would bolster their ideals and lead them on a journey to reinstate the values of gender and class equality. Maryam assumes the quintessential role of the other, but since she succumbs to this discourse, instead of fighting it, she affirms bourgeois values. Laila, the younger, more idealistic, more outspoken of the two women, is the antithesis of the bourgeois, and she retaliates against her allotted discourse as a male-owned object. She also mirrors the Marxist belief of class equality by maintaining and stimulating a familial relationship with the lower class Maryam. It is pivotal in the relationship between Laila and Maryam, particularly when they completely overcome Rashid's dominance. In the book's climax, Laila is almost choked by Rashid as punishment for letting another man come into his house without him present. His sense of Laila's betrayal infuriates him to the point of wanting to dispose of this dishonorable woman. In Laila's defense, Maryam breaks free of her ingrained servitude as housewife, maid and cook, and becomes Laila's savior as well as her own, killing Rashid with her own physical strength, encouraged by years of sadness, solitude, and repression. Through transgression, Maryam's rediscovery of her freedom is seen as a renovation of her role of a submissive wife when she chooses to subvert the recognized position portrayed by her religious beliefs, close relatives, and community that have failed her. By leaving her town and finding a new self-identification, she shows resistance in her own way. In the same way, Laila's choice to leave everything behind, to develop again a new feeling of self, separated from her coercion, to measure up to the expectations and needs of others, symbolizes one of the most important examples of female resistance in the novel. The final emancipation in the form of Maryam's crushing of Rashid's skull can also be seen symbolically as the oppressed group crushing not only the vision it holds of itself, but the vision that the dominating faction has forced them to believe. As Laila escapes, Maryam stays behind to pay the price for her crime, that is death. As she faces execution, which ironically is the same price a male would pay for killing another man in Afghanistan, she does not lament, but labels herself a person of consequence at last. The novel symbolizes the problems of the struggle for liberation at two levels, as post-colonial individuals and as females. From the post-colonial viewpoint, A Thousand Splendid Suns reveals the conflicts of identifying and identification with the Afghan individual in the native lifestyle. The novel symbolizes the problems of the struggle for liberation at two levels, as post-colonial individuals and as females. From the post-colonial viewpoint, A Thousand Splendid Suns reveals the conflicts of identifying with the Afghan individual in the native lifestyle. The feminist viewpoint is depicted through the problems of struggle of Afghan females to find their own self-identity as distinct from the picture acknowledged by patriarchal components and principles. As regards subjugation, Hosseini addresses some powerful issues confronted by the women in Afghanistan in this novel: forceful marriages, lack of freedom and identity, as well as limited space in terms of mental, social, cultural and psychological freedom. A Thousand Splendid Suns shows the political structures that support the devaluation, degradation and violence endured by Maryam and Laila. The term resistance is taken from one of Edward Said's popular texts, Culture and Imperialism. The level of resistance in feminist literature can be considered from two perspectives. The first is the challenging of the credibility of the male-dominated or patriarchal literary tradition, while the second involves the renovation of new identities of women from the non-existence or silenced space of masculine discourse. It implies the challenging of the credibility of the male-dominated or patriarchal literary tradition, and also involves the renovation of new identities of women from the non-existence or silenced space of masculine discourse. The oppression of women in Afghanistan is linked to a world of male dominance, most significantly associated with the Islamic fundamentalist group the Taliban in the early 1990s. Maryam's journey from an unwanted child towards a belittled and barren wife shows the wretched plight of Afghan women. From a feminist perspective, Maryam's role as a woman and caregiver is penalized by her inability to conceive. Laila and Maryam are not only victims of abuse, they also resist. They learn to re-exercise agency and retrieve their selfhood that was damaged due to oppression through their act of revolutionary violence. The final emancipation in the form of Maryam's crushing of Rashid's skull can also be seen symbolically as the oppressed group crushing not only the vision it holds of itself, but the vision that the dominating faction has forced them to believe. Both Arundhati Roy and Khalid Hosseini have portrayed the issues related to post-colonial studies with equal empathy and sensitivity in their respective novels. Through different forms of subversion and resistance of their characters, the two novelists have not only successfully addressed the problem of silencing, which the underprivileged and subordinated classes are forced to succumb to, but also tried to reaffirm their voices. In conclusion, it may be said that the powerful fictional characters in the two novels represent the voice of thousands of discriminated and victimized groups, a voice that resonates persistently all over the world.